Wes, how are you?
Hey, good. How's it going?
Oh no, I can't hear you. Can you say it again?
How about now?
I think
Anything?
it's better. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, I got it.
This is better? Okay, great. Awesome.
Yeah, much better. Can folks in YouTube Live hear me? Audio check. We have Kaz in here. If he wants to come up, he can. And do we have Elias as well? No, not right now. Okay, well let's get started a little bit. Easy. Tesla stock down 1.9%. Markets are flat. Russell 2000 up 0.4%. I'm going to skip the macro data and let's go right into it. Kaz, how are you?
I'm doing well. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Your sound quality is bad. So are you going to be in a better situation later on? We can do it later.
Here in about 7 minutes, I will be arriving at my destination.
Okay, perfect. Let's do it then. I'm going to move you down to listener mode for now. And then maybe by then we'll get Elias as well. And we can chat about the tracker. Wes, how are you doing? What's on your radar?
The Dirty Tesla, wife of Dirty Tesla auto park videos are amazing, if folks haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, she said they tried it 5 times, and out of 5 times, it did perfectly all 5 times. Do you think that's perfection will continue?
It looks like it. From what I'm seeing, how they determine if a space is available, it looks very deterministic. In other words, the system seems to calculate it with an extreme amount of high confidence. And the maneuver that it uses to get into the spot is extremely simple. The planned path looks extremely smooth. And the steering wheel movements are very smooth as well. There's very little steering wheel movement overall. So it looks like it's pulling into the space with like extreme high confidence. So I would assume a very high success rate.
Great. Dale?
Hey, Wes, I have a question for you. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but I'm wondering what you picture as a guess where Tesla is right now on what tools have they invented, do you think, that they currently have that allows them to curate data in a rapid way to target problems? Do you have any sort of sense of what might have been invented as a guess as to how they do that rapidly and safely?
Yeah, there is one patent that talks about turning video into ground truth from a Ashoke, but it's from several years ago. So maybe they've implemented that. There are also, and this is all speculation, but there's also what we're seeing, some amount of potentially emergent behavior, or it could be quick turnaround learned behavior, which would be very interesting, but I haven't seen good conclusive evidence for either one yet. We've always had shadow mode but it's not a great high signal to noise ratio. We do have good verbal feedback data, which is obviously a much higher signal, a better signal to say that the system should be fixed in this particular scenario. And they've talked about it, this kind of this path from seeing issues in the field to turning that into a kind of a solid fix with no regressions. This is the kind of the canonical, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, where you're always, when you add things, you usually end up being less efficient with your compute at first, but you've taken 3 steps forward, but you're slightly less efficient in how you did that. So that's kind of that 1 step back. And that's why over time, we need more compute to solve these problems. And then at some point, we'll get to the point where we solve it, and then we'll become more efficient. But Tesla's kind of doing those 2 things together, where they're making the overall model more efficient as well. This is the foundational step that was taken. And we're starting to see a lot of new behavior. And this is where I come from the standpoint of, is it emergent or is it quick learned behavior? And as we start to see more data and more iterative builds come out, that will make itself apparent. The specific tools I talked about a little bit, but that's like pure speculation until we have another AI day where they kind of talk about it. And if we get more data, that might become apparent. I think it is really interesting that I noticed, just for folks who haven't seen this yet, there's a new icon that is appearing on the display when the system is telling it exact live location, but it's not transferring any PII, or it seems like it might be an aggregate. So I don't see this yet. Kaz actually responded to this, so he can maybe talk to it a little bit more, that it seems like it's coupled with an app update, which I don't believe I've gotten yet because I haven't seen this. But then again, I haven't driven my 12.3 build quite a bit yet. So anyway, maybe slightly longer winded. Hope that helps.
Yeah, it really does. I kind of picture, and again, this is all a guess, but I'm just very interested in, the curation of this incoming data, how they do that so rapidly. The tools they've built must be just amazing. And I guess I tend to think of, let's talk about when somebody has to intervene with the drive. As soon as that data is uploaded, I would imagine that Tesla has some sort of dashboard that's telling them where these interventions are exactly, geolocating it, and putting it in a human readable form, kind of in real time. Like I imagine something like that happening so that they can quickly identify, go after problems, make changes, and then send updates to the fleet. Do you think I'm off on that? Or does that sound reasonable?
It sounds pretty straightforward. Maybe just to quickly walk through maybe what it might look like. So the first builds go out to the dev team, right? They drive them. They try to understand if they've actually fixed the thing that they were going off and trying to fix and didn't introduce major regressions. And then usually, at least the way that I left it, is that the professional drivers, definite Tesla employees or contracted with very specific tasks and very specific routes and very specific scenarios that they need to look at, they go off and they drive it to make sure that the issues are fixed and no major regressions are introduced, and it's typically a wider validation set of things. And that feedback used to be very verbal and very non-digital. It was very analog. In other words, they had to send spinny disk drives, back to Palo Alto for us to review. I'm sure it's all digital now, and I'm sure there's some amount of flags that are set, and they can do a very specific flag. In other words, just click the screen to note a spot, and then it's digitally transferred. In other words, the video hopefully will pull out or they have a tool or some infrastructure that pulls out the exact things that the driver noted were wrong in that scenario. And then I would hope that their infrastructure has a way to determine if that is a lack of a fix or a new regression. So like you actually didn't fix the thing that you thought you fixed, or you have introduced something new that wasn't there before. So it kind of fits into those two classes. And I'm sure there's more detail there, but I'm kind of giving you a high level. And that what I would hope would extrapolate to every set of new testers as kind of the funnel gets wider as you get to like, you know, this full wide release, so that you can track as your new code goes wider, you can track this delta, this difference, you know, that you're getting better with your key metrics. So I would hope that, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's what I hope is in place now, that it's more digital than analog and it's more instantaneous. And this kind of leads me to believe that they might have a potential to do some kind of quick learning for certain scenarios, but obviously non-deterministic currently.
Thank you, guys. Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Sitting in my Cybertruck in a parking lot.
Nice. Do you have like 75 people around you?
No, I'm just in a Home Depot parking lot, so everyone's kind of minding their own business, but I did go to In-N-Out, and when I went to go get my food at the drive-thru, the girl at the register was like, "Look, guys, it's a Cybertruck." And all the employees were like, "Oh shit, a Cybertruck." They're like, "I've never seen one before." So that was kind of funny.
That's fun. Wes?
Hey, you commented on the Doug DeMuro, and you tried to cut your doll in half, and I thought that was just brilliant and spot on, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit about the Cybertruck. I mean, if you drive it, you're just like, wow, this thing's incredible. But these Cybertruck haters, they just are stretching to find reasons why this is a terrible product, even, going to the extent of making things up. So, for example, like, one of the things is that your arm is going to get cut off by the front, which, first of all, don't be an idiot. Don't put your arm or your fingers in the door and shut it. I mean, this is basic stuff. Are we going to go recall every car because people are slamming the fingers in the door? Somehow people have managed to keep their fingers clear of the door. But if you're a total idiot and you leave your fingers or your arms or whatever there, which, I wouldn't recommend fingers especially, but, it has the same kind of thing. It'll detect resistance and it'll open again. So, for example, if you're, just loading your luggage and your luggage is a little bit over the space for it to close, then you'll see it kind of hit it and then open again. So it won't like smash your luggage into pieces, for example. So, this is just another example of the bullshit reasons people come up with. All these videos sort of go viral because the Cybertruck's such a huge thing right now. You're seeing, rappers put it in their music videos and stuff. Kim Kardashian posting a whole photo shoot on Instagram with it. I mean, this thing is just like an instant icon, and it spells trouble for a lot of people. I mean, today's Ford F-150 Lightning production cut, I think, is just the beginning. Eventually, we're going to get a production cut of the gas-powered version too. That's where I think this thing is going. I mean, when you drive it, it's like no comparison. This thing feels so smooth and futuristic and high tech compared to your average truck. They're not even in the same league.
Yeah, Omar, I
We
saw that.
have just 1 second, Dale. We have Kaz and Elias in the audience. When they're ready, just come on up, talk about the FSD. And I think Kaz was driving, so when he stopped at his destination and has better audio quality, he can come up and we start talking about Tracker. Dale, go ahead.
So Omar, I saw that video where they were slamming fingers with the Cybertruck. So one of the advantages I have, I don't own a Tesla. I have an old traditional auto, an old Toyota. And I did some differential testing today, and I had a friend slam the door as hard as he could while my fingers were in the way. And I can confirm that it'll take your fingers right off on a Toyota as well.
All right. Kaz, are you ready?
Yeah, hopefully I'm coming through a bit better now.
Yeah, much better. Elias, how are you?
I'm doing good. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it's great. So recently you posted an increase in miles to disengagement in city streets, right? So that was, I believe, March 26th. So I see it in your pinned tweet. I'll pin it up here as well to your space. And so you guys can see it at the top of your screen. And if you haven't been to fsdtracker.com, that Elias created and Cause contributed a lot as well, you can check it out. There's a lot of probable information, and this tracker has improved quite a lot. Even though it's not a scientific, study, and it's not as detailed and comprehensive as the data that Tesla has, I think it's still very informative. And maybe Elias can tell us about some of the changes that they have incorporated into the tracker over the last year. Elias, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the methodology goes, the data collection has been the same. There's only been a few differences. For example, there's 2 people that I've integrated with their spreadsheets that they have online that they're maintaining on their own. But as far as the way we collect the data, it goes through either a Google data entry form or through the EV Guide Canada app that is developed that you can put in your browser in your car, and you can record events while you drive, and it also records mileage while you drive. That's honestly the best way to track it, because if you do it through the in-browser tracker, it tracks the locations of events. And if you saw my post from this morning, you can glean a lot more data from it to show persistent issues, meaning issues happening in the same location, the same type of disengagement within 110 meters. And it helps you gather additional insights beyond just a miles to disengagement. So there's been a lot of little tweaks to visualizations, little tweaks to different dashboards, like Kaz got brought into the 21st century with his robo-taxi dashboard, worked with Edge Case 411 to get a survey put together to visualize that. Just been taking a lot of feedback from the community on different things that they want to see. For the most part, the data is able to be presented in a way. I've also explored other visualizations, just kind of playing around with the data because it's fun for me. I can't get enough of just kind of digging in there and seeing what I can see. Much like what I pulled out in today's post, it's just mind blowing seeing the progress in V12. We've been, kind of stunted a little bit. It felt like painful, reporting the same thing over and over and over and over again, thousands of times. But seeing it just vanish and disappear is just truly impressive.
Great, thank you. Kaz, do you have any initial thoughts that you want to follow up with?
I mean, Elias pretty much hit the nail on the head there. Honestly, compared to what he's built with the community as a whole, my single portion seems rather small, even though I do have quite the scale in operational time and experience. I guess I enjoy that I'm able to, because of Elias bringing me into the 21st century, can actually show the proof of concept for the robotaxi front. And I'm just really excited to see the performance at the level of 4.2 and likely staying up there and improving going forward. I'm already really itching to get 12.3.2.1 or whatever currently is out there, so I can test the very few failure conditions that I've found, which is really fun. It's getting to a point where it's going to take some serious hunting, I think, to really punish the system.
Thank you, Kaz. Elias, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the recent changes you're seeing in the data? Do you feel that there is a material change with V12, or do you think this is noise that's going to revert to the mean later on?
No, it's definitely obvious within the first 24 hours of me driving, because I drive the same routes, to from work. going to the grocery store, running errands. I know exactly where my disengagements are, and I know exactly when they're going to happen. I report them every time and track them every time. And the first time I took FSD out for a drive, I knew exactly where I wanted to go and what was going to happen or what I thought was going to happen. And when it didn't happen, I was just like, oh man, this is cool. And as I kept driving more and more and more, I'm just like, none of my issues that I used to have are here anymore. They all left. And it's just been, I've been monitoring the persistent disengagements. And I'm just like, there is no way, like in my mind, there's no way that persistent disengagements that I've reported thousands of times just somehow vanished. Like I just couldn't believe it. And I waited till I got enough mileage. I've driven 500 miles. I've done my round trip back to work, like, I don't know how many times now at this point, like 20 times. And I'm like, they're gone. I just don't know how else to explain it. And the post that I did this morning, if you haven't seen it, definitely recommend you to go look at it. But I basically visualized that in charts, 4 different charts to show where my persistent disengagement happening versions over time. And then there has not been a single disengagement that. Can you guys hear me still?
Yeah, it's actually better this way.
Okay, maybe my headset, somebody tried to call me. But just basically, my disengagements disappeared and the data shows it. And it's just like absolutely mind blowing, like just looking at it and just, I'm still like in disbelief. Like as I was putting together the charts this morning, I already knew what I was going to present, but just visualizing it, I still just can't believe that I haven't had a single disengagement happen in the same location twice.
That's interesting. Wes, what do you think about that comment? A single disengagement hasn't happened in the same location twice.
That's fascinating. Are you saying that over all of your miles, your critical disengagements have dropped to 0? And then on top of that, you're not seeing any regressions that are repeatable? Is that correct?
Wes, take a look at what I posted this morning. I basically have 4 different charts in there. And the first chart shows the disengagements by version in the same location. And I'm only counting things that happen twice. So imagine there's a lane issue that always happens in the same spot. I know we've heard from Dirty Tesla talking about lane drift happening in the same spot. So imagine that lane drift now gets reported 2, 3, 4, 5, 9+ times. So I tracked all those disengagements hundreds and thousands of times. And then on top of that, you could see it across versions, the percent of disengagements that happen in the same location. So imagine I have 1,000 disengagements. 50% of those happen in the same spot. So when you looked at a miles to disengagement overall, if 50% of my disengagements are happening in the same spot and I travel through those every day for my commute, then of course the miles of disengagement in my case was 6 miles to a disengagement was my average since October 2021. My average was 6 miles to a disengagement. And so if I'm having the same disengagements over and over again, of course my mileage to disengagement is never going to change because they just keep happening repeatedly. But if you look at that data, it shows that in 1149, I was having 56% of my disengagements happening in the same location. A lot of it was mainly due to lane drift and a lot of lane issues. But when those things disappeared, I now have 0% of all my disengagements are now unique. They're like edge cases. They're not things that happen in the same spot. They're not things that are happening all the time. It's just a one-off, like some dude cut me off or something and I had to disengage or something. These are not things that are because of some map issue or something else. And then the third chart in there gives you a breakdown of fixes. So I calculate fixes based on disengagements that happen in the same location for previous versions. And then if it happened in a future version, it's like, nope, it's still not fixed because I just saw it again. So I'm doing a difference between what has happened and what has happened in the current version. So what has happened in previous versions and what has happened in the current version. And so what I presented is basically 600 different disengagements that I had on 11.4.x are all fixed and gone. And these are persistent disengagements that have disappeared in my mileage driving. Obviously, I still need to drive a little more on V12, but I still think I'm pretty confident that Tesla fixed, right now it's 100%, but Tesla fixed 90+% of my persistent disengagements that happen the same time, or sorry, same location multiple times. And then the fourth chart that you'll see there is I basically made a scatter plot that depicts the XY axis for the latitude, longitude, but I mask it out so I'm not showing my map location. I'm not sharing my where I drive kind of patterns and stuff. But it basically shows an overlay of all 11 4X locations of where I had 2+ disengagements in the same location. And then I overlay on top of that the V12 disengagements, but it's only single disengagements. They're not multiple disengagements. And you can see the green plus signs are plastered all over that scatter plot. And then the red X's are just unique little things that have happened, but it's not very many. And that's like my normal driving area of going to work and running errands and stuff like that. So it's just, if you haven't seen that, take a look at it, because like I said, putting it together, seeing the data, it's just absolutely mind blowing to see, hundreds of persistent disengagements disappear.
I pinned at the top of our screens the graphs that Elias is talking about. How many of my persistent disengagements have been resolved in 12.3? This posted a lot of engagement, Elias. 120,000 people saw this. 4 graphs, amazing. Wes, by the way, I wish we had somebody who super experienced about these topics. Oh, there he is. Speak of the devil. Meta, welcome.
Hey guys. I was listening as I was eating. My question for Elias is, are you counting it only if it's 2 in a row or if it's 2 at any point?
2 at any point. So that first chart shows on the right side the extreme where I had 9+ disengagements, like in 50+ locations, where I was reporting it over 9 times. And if you look at the raw data, some of those I've reported like 200 times.
Right. So it's not just that they're persistent, right? It's more that they're like map based is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, most of my issues, like I think it's last time I looked at it, I think it was at like 70 or 80% were lane issues.
Wes.
Hey, sorry, my Twitter app messed up on me.
That's okay.
So
going forward, no hands mode. No hands mode going forward.
The data is amazing, and obviously I think we all really appreciate it, because we can try to glean from this if we truly are on the march of nines. And I'm trying to temper my expectations at this point that we are, but it does seem like this is like the beginning of it. But I'll continue to ask a few clarifying questions. I think you said that only 4% of your issues noted are recurring. Was that a correct statement that I heard from you?
0% of my issues are recurring in V12.
Oh, 0%. Okay, I thought I heard you say 96% of something.
Okay,
maybe
check out the upper right graph.
The 90%. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. The upper right graph in the pin tweet at the top is talking about 0%. If you click into that graph, you'll see all the way to the right, 12 shows 0%. Guys?
Yeah, the 90% thing I was referring to was when I get more mileage, like when I get to 2,000 miles, for example, of driven on V12, I want to look back and see where it's at. And I'm just imagining that I missed some spot. Maybe I'm just overlooking it. And by the time I hit 2,000 miles, I'll look back again. And still, I think it'll be greater than 90% of my previous issues will still be gone. That means, there could be 10% or a buffer there. But I would be surprised if it's a lot higher than that. I can feel it. And I know my regular routes. I know where I go. And it's just vanished, absolutely gone.
that's awesome.
I have a request for Omar. Can we borrow your Cybertruck? Because Yaman said it's no hands mode, and apparently the Cybertruck can help us get to no hands.
That's a stretch. I'm trying to accept machine, but for some reason it's not working. Dale, I'm going to use that first. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I just can't accept machines.
Okay, keep working on that. Elias, I think the problem that I was experiencing was that I didn't really understand that graph. because until Yaman pointed it out to me, I didn't understand that there was a 0% down there, and that was
Right.
aligned with 12.3, because it's such a stark difference. It might be better to show that data in a different format, maybe like a line, so the line just goes straight down to 0, so it kind of like guides you there. So that's great. So my understanding is that your drives, not aggregated drives, but your drives have been 0% recurring. Is that correct, or is there more data?
So if you go to the community tracker page, one of the tabs is issue tracking. Of course, V12 hasn't rolled out wide yet, but I know, for example, EV Guy Canada, the guy that built the in-car browser tracker app, he just got V12 3.1 yesterday, and currently it's sitting at 0%. Of course, still low mileage because it's only 1 day. But basically across 2 V12 versions and the small data set we have so far of people using the EV Guy Canada app for V12 data, it is showing 0 across both versions.
That's awesome. Well, that's it, folks. I mean, that's the start. As we start to see more people and more miles, if we don't see that number go up, then we are walking down that path, which is super cool.
I just wanted to echo that that sort of performance is directly translating to a lot of confidence and success with customer trips. The only failures I'm getting that have us down just below 90% over 54 trips is just those same like gauntlet reentry point, bike lane type stuff. So once one of these versions fixes that, that robo report's going to start to look pretty insane.
Machine, what do you think about this? 0%. Is that good enough for you?
I
No
think
errors? Is perfection good enough for you?
I think I have a lot of problems with you people, except for Elias. Elias, just remember, I'm the only
Is
one
it
here.
Elias or Elias?
Elias,
Which one?
excuse me.
Which one?
Elias, baby.
Elias.
Elias, I am the only one who trusted in you a year ago. A year ago, when we brought up this website, and these other speakers weren't happy with what the graphs were saying. So therefore, they totally discounted it and said, no, the people are biased. You can't get anything from this. And I said, no, listen, there's going to be signal to noise here. There's going to be bias. But when this software truly takes a step change, you're going to see it in the results. And I literally got kicked off the spaces because of that statement. And now you come around a year later.
So dramatic.
A year later, look at these people fawning over the same data. So predictable. I knew this was going to happen. I told you so.
Are you done pumping your chest?
Yep.
Wes, would you like to set the record straight?
I would like the machine non-parity account to return, please.
It's impossible to separate the two. I don't think Wes was here when we had that conversation. So Wes, you're excused. Wes is like the only reasonable person. I know Meta and Omar and Yaman definitely were all saying, oh no, it's biased. That's why you can't see the differences between the versions of V11.
That's not true. That's not true.
It was absolutely true. Go look it up. You have the
I
recording.
haven't changed my
That is
opinion on
Yeah,
it.
I'll let you guys fight it out.
This is a wild mischaracterization of what was said, and a rewrite of history to the point where I think the Soviet Union historians would be ashamed. Anyway,
Maybe they'll hire me.
Yeah, I haven't changed my opinion on the data set at all.
well, tell us more.
Give me a few minutes to get home. I'll be home in 5 minutes.
Okay. Elias, maybe we can kind of explore that gray area a little bit. What is some of the pushback that you get for the data tracker, and how has that pushback evolved over the years?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And Machine, I appreciate your enthusiasm. I said that the first time you jumped on, and I didn't know the kind of personality that you had. So it cracks me up that you've stuck to your guns and defended the data, even just to give Yaman shit. But the big thing is, I'm open to feedback. It's all about figuring out the best way to represent the data. As I mentioned earlier when I jumped on here, was trying to keep the same methodology, or at least mostly the same, because the more changes you try to make to stuff, it could affect how the output of the data is. Of course, you hear the comments about, oh, well, it's user submitted data, that it's a bunch of fans submitting data. And honestly, yeah, I'm a fan. I'm not going to say I'm not a Tesla fan, but at the same time, people like Kaz, myself, there's a few other people, Ian from EV Guy Canada, Matt from Santoro Systems, like, we all have a different perspective when it comes to data. It's not about making Tesla look good or bad. It's about presenting the data. And I think people look at the data and they're like, they just dismiss it because it doesn't show what they think it should show. And one thing to just keep in mind, or maybe they say it's a small sample size. One thing to keep in mind is that this takes a lot of work. So you're not going to have people in here coming in here to bash the data and make it look bad, because that takes time. It takes work to do that. And then you're not going to also have the other side of it where people are coming in here just to put in, 1,000 zero disengagement drives to say everything's perfect. So the people that are in here are doing the work, and they're tracking it in a very granular detail. And it's because they care. They want to share this data with the community. And it's an important, valuable thing that they think if we're all working together to provide this data, it makes it more relevant. And when people dismiss or discredit the work that we're doing, to me, it's like a slap in the face to all the people's hard work put into this. And I get there's going to be criticism. I have thick skin. I can take the heat. But again, when we talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it, it's not to make Tesla look good or bad. It's about presenting the data so people can understand what FSD is and isn't capable of doing, but also tracking progress and where we need to go, maybe recommendations and things that maybe some of these influencers can push to Tesla to say, hey, here's the areas that we need to get fixed. What doesn't help Tesla is saying that, oh, we had, another zero disengagement drive, hands-free, no takeovers. Like, that doesn't help anything, right? We need to focus on the problems, and lane issues has been a problem for like the longest time. And it's still trending towards being the higher end of the issues. But a lot of them have disappeared. Luckily, that's been one of the biggest things with V12, but we got to stop focusing on presenting the good. The good is awesome and it's fun to see, and it's fun to see progress, but we have to be also presenting what things need to get worked on. And, people like EdgeCase has also done a great job at presenting examples of where it still needs work. And we just have to look at that, because especially as we get closer down the road where things start disappearing and we start getting to the March of Nines, like we want to get there, we're going to have to start looking at these hard problems, and we can't be bashing each other down or talking about how bad the data is. The data, like I said, people are doing the work and they're doing the best job that they can with what we have. It's not a perfect system, but as it shows, you can see, there's very good rigor and objectivity going into this data, and being able to present what the problems are and the successes is very important.
Just to be clear, I think there is a misrepresentation that Machine is doing here. There is a big difference between us saying the data is being collected in a rigorous and honest manner. I don't think anybody's questioning that. And there's a difference in
Absolutely.
saying, looking at the data, you can draw certain conclusions. As an example, in the early days when perception stack was the main issue being dealt with, this data doesn't show progress. It doesn't show a lack of progress. It's just that this data is being collected for end to end, right? And in a similar way, as they start focusing on critical disengagements only, it's awesome that you actually added that breakout, right? And then after that, it's deaths only, then accidents, then small things, then accelerometer stuff. So I think breaking it into phases has been very helpful, just like you're showing now, right? Like, we're seeing a really big improvement on one release for maps specific stuff, but that from the team's perspective is really only one feature. So in a sense of progress is how we measure it, right? There's the customer experience, and there's the march of nines in terms of bug bashing that the team has to do. And I think those don't always correlate.
Wes.
I think yeah, and I get that there might be some history here, but I'm very interested in moving forward and like figuring out best ways to look and to display the canonical like March of Nines type data analysis that you could be doing. And I've got some ideas for that to show that you might be on the March of Nines right now, but everybody else might not be. And in the way that you drive or the way that other people drive and where they drive, that's the kind of data that I think to visualize that would be extremely powerful, because that would demonstrate that we are, and like what data needs to be filled in to get there so that we could statistically calculate if we were truly on that or not. So I'm interested to pursue that.
Do we know if the Tesla API has the FSD versus non-FSD miles available through the API? Like for those customers that do have Tesla insurance?
No hands mode.
Yeah, so I looked at the API about a week ago, and it's very obscure when you get into the FSD miles. I know Tesla Scope is able to do it, which means there has to be some way to pull it, and I can't remember the endpoint off the top of my head, but there's a vehicle. Oh, I remember. It's vehicle data. Vehicle data provides you some data points, and it can show you mileage. But I'm assuming the API documentation hasn't been updated, and I haven't messed with the API. I haven't had a chance, but one of the things that I know it does not have is disengagements. You only could see that through the app. So that would be a big thing if we could see disengagements recorded or provided. I was talking to Green yesterday, just chatting back and forth, but that would be huge if we were able to access the disengagement locations, because then they could aggregate it a little bit differently and a little more in a larger data pool.
Do you have your customers' OAuth credentials, like login, so you could, in the event that I can get you an API by snooping what the mobile data is calling as an endpoint, would you be able to make use of that?
Yeah, I have a little bit of Python skills, and I've played around with APIs. I just haven't had a chance to mess with it. I just kind of was just poking around, looking.
Fair enough. I'll hook up Wireshark to my phone and see if I can get you something by the end of this weekend.
Omar, welcome back.
Hey,
So what do you think about the recent improvements that Elias's and COG FSD tracker is showing?
well, I mean, I think it's to be expected, but we also just have to remember what the data is. And my opinion hasn't changed just because it looks good. I mean, if you sort of surveyed people and there really is an improvement, you'd expect people to broadly say that there's an improvement. But, ultimately, this is just surveying people and asking them what they think. So, are you getting a representative sample of the entire user base? Probably not. I mean, who's going, and, this isn't about putting down the people who are doing this. I think it's great that people are doing this and that people are taking their time to enter and try and get at least some empirical data that we can analyze. I think that's awesome, because otherwise we have nothing. But you just have to sort of understand, okay, is this a representative sample of the fleet? Are these people who are, you know, evenly distributed geographically? There's a lot of noise inherent in this data, right? Like, let's say that I have an issue in my neighborhood where it jumps into a left turn lane, and every left turn lane that opens up, it jumps in there. And I might say, okay, I had 10 disengagements in 10 miles. But okay, then they fix that issue. Then it goes down to, one disengagement in 10 miles or something like that. There's just a lot of noise inherent in the data. It's not necessarily the fault of anybody. There's obviously limitations to what you can do with this type of survey. But it's not, you'd still expect to be able to see changes in the data if there's a new version and it improves, of course. But it's not necessarily representative of what's going to be going on in the entire country. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the data. It doesn't mean we can't look at it to learn things. But We just have to understand it in the context of what it actually is, which is survey data from people. I mean, the same group of people may have a very different definition of when they need to disengage, when they need to press an accelerator press. One guy may press the accelerator if it's waiting for 1 second. Another guy may wait 5 seconds. So if the system was going to go after 3 seconds, those people are going to have a different definition of what an intervention is. Let's say that the car almost hits somebody. Well, does the person notice? If they don't notice, then they might not disengage or might not count it as a disengagement. Somebody else might disengage even when something was going to be fine. So it's an inherently noisy data set. But of course, I can't necessarily think of a better way to do it. So it is what it is. Doesn't mean it's useless, but you kind of have to just look at it with the perspective of this isn't really what the true data is. There's going to be some noise in there, but it gives us a window into what's going on across the fleet.
Thank you for all that. Just 1 second, Wes. Machine, earlier you had a problem coming up to the speaker board. What was the problem? Because I just had the same problem with somebody else.
Well, I think I requested, and then it seemed like there was an icon showing up that was you were asking me to come up or something. I had to click on that. So there's like a
Okay, so I have
two-step
to send
process.
I have to send an invite to somebody.
But before Wes speaks, I had my hand raised. You just can't see it.
No. Oh yeah, that's right. Why don't you
I don't
just
want
do
the
it like
app.
everybody? Okay.
App
Why?
sucks.
Your wife doesn't allow you?
No, I don't. It's not that useful, to be honest.
Just be honest. Your
I am
wife
being honest.
said you
Uh,
can't be on the app, right?
To continue being honest, the difference in the conversation on the utility of this data was a year ago when I was talking about big picture progress toward robotaxis, that the level of disengagements, critical disengagements, would have to go down so much for robotaxis that it would become obvious in the data, even with 100 people, even with the issues of bias and the issues of people trying more challenging routes as the software gets better. All these things are all legitimate points that makes the software have the data have noise. But in the big picture, the grand scheme of things, in terms of how much disengagements would have to go down, that it would be so clear in the data that it's still useful. And those points were bashed by members here. And predictably, now we see everyone actually is like, oh, yeah, look, wow, the disengagements did go down 3x, 4x. And now I guarantee you everyone is like, yeah, actually, we can trust it for that level. So as we go toward robotaxis, which we are not yet at, I bet people here now realize that even with this limited data set and its flaws, you can trust that the disengagements are going to have to go down another 10x or more.
We got the
And
point. You don't have to say it 10 times. By the way, root is British English, right? It's really route, American English. I thought you were American. Aren't you from California with blonde hair and blue eyes?
route, like a route, you mean like a path?
Yeah. You said roots. Why don't you work on your pronunciation?
Question. I got to think about that.
Wes and then Omar.
Yeah, Machine kind of said a little bit of what I was going to say, but yes, and Omar's right. But as you expand the number of people, inherently you're going to get more signal out of the noise. That's just the way that statistics works. So my thought, just to put a blunt number on it, is Elias, like once you get above like 1,000 users, and those users are not all in one geographic location, they're more of a wide disbursement, we're going to start to really see truly if we are on this march of nines or not. So that's my simple statement.
Yeah, so what I would say to Machine is the disengagements were going down since December 22 when they started working on FSD 12. But we were measuring these public releases that they weren't doing much work on. They were focusing on V12. So you're looking at this spreadsheet where they're making minor changes and you're going, oh my God, it still had the same issue. But we weren't really seeing what was really happening. Now all of a sudden, we see this big drop. And let me tell you, this version still sucks. Okay, it still sucks ass. The next few versions we're gonna see, we're gonna make this look like a complete joke. They've already shipped Auto Park. They're gonna ship Smart Summon, and a lot of these sort of behaviors we're seeing in the early versions of the model, they're going to be resolved with more training, more data. The huge number of users they've added, it's going to be significant in allowing them to find those failure points and fix them very quickly. So, it's seem like they're getting a little overexcited about this because they're seeing it for the first time, but it still sucks, relatively speaking, right?
Meta. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just end by saying, so we had these people like Machine, for example, who came in here and they said it's impossible. It can't work with this hardware. The hardware is simply not capable of doing perfect drives. And people harassed me. They called me names. They said, "You're a liar. It can't work. The cameras just aren't good enough. Look, I have a mathematical formula." And now people all over the country are experiencing perfect drives and they're saying, "See, I told you, the spreadsheet." And it's like, hello, you were completely fucking wrong. It turned out that it can actually do perfect drives with this hardware, which I said, look, it's doing it for me quite often. I think this could be the case. I think they could fix these issues in other areas. And they did. And instead of machines saying, oh, I'm wrong, I actually fucked up. Maybe I should think a little more about my predictions next time. He says he actually starts saying we were wrong. It's just kind of funny.
Unbelievable.
Machine, you literally
It's
came in
true.
here.
It's
and you were-
true.
Unbelievable.
It's
You-
true.
You
This
literally
sucks.
came in here
Omar
with math.
said, listen, Omar's representation, as colorful as it is more accurate than how you presented it 5 minutes ago.
Absolutely not. When I talked about the hardware limitations, which I still do, it's in the context of robotaxi level reliability.
I think the
Not
best data
that is
for that.
absolutely. I keep saying the same thing.
Listen,
Robotaxi
can we
reliability.
just hold on? Just hold on a second. Let's see. We have 2 hosts right now. I think Omar was more accurate. Let's ask macro analyst if he thinks more accurate. Macro analyst agrees. There you go.
I think the best data for the robotaxi approach, Kaz has been doing a great job, right? He's the same person putting a lot of miles. You remove the subjectivity that comes into when you're collecting data. And as both Elias, Kaz, Omar, and others have pointed out, that are respecting the data, but also understanding what the data represents. When we're looking at subjective data, the bar is moving. Lane drift is something people complain about now, but like 2 years ago, people would have been excited to have a build where lane drift was the issue. As I understand it, with lane drift, you drifted out of the lane and then you went back into the lane. It's not like you had to take something over. It was inconvenient.
No.
Scary.
It stayed in the left lane, dude.
It stayed in the left lane. Did it make a
Yeah,
wrong turn?
it didn't come back. Yes,
Okay.
stayed in the wrong lane. Just to be clear.
Okay. Well, in that case, clearly that's an issue that prevents it from being usable. It's the equivalent of like the nag going up or something along those lines. But from a progress perspective, if we're just talking purely engineering, I don't think anybody should look at that and say they can never fix it. So I think there was a lot of nevers being stated, looking at the data and saying, if these improvements are happening, how come we're not seeing it in the data? And the problem was the person making those statements hadn't really experienced the vehicle. So as it was discussed in this space, it's really hard to describe the comfort. And Elias said the same thing, right? The data is saying one thing, but his experience is like, it's clearly qualitatively different. So there's different ways to look at
Machine
it.
just took his ball and went home. Let me just go to real quick. Jinsu, did you have something? Is this the first time you're coming up to keyboard, Jinsu?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
it's
hear
not,
you.
Okay, yeah, it's not the first time, but but I do come up pretty infrequently. Like my background is that I'm a software developer. I I built a like an app using the Tesla REST API before, and I'm currently building one using their Bluetooth API. Now there is like certain features that the Tesla mobile app uses that are not documented in their documentation. But you know, anything that is that the Tesla mobile app shows should be somehow like accessible or reverse engineerable from the traffic that they're sending though.
Yeah, you can use Wireshark to snoop the packets usually.
All right, Machine says he left because he has to order Popeyes. But if you have any questions for Machine, you can go to YouTube Live. He's over there. All right. Any other questions, comments for the tracker?
Elias, I think you mentioned you had some ideas on how to start differentiating between customer preference versus like comfort, like things that they're doing where they wouldn't care if it was a robotaxi, but they would care if it was like an ADAS system where they're behind the driver's wheel. How are you planning to? I'm curious to hear more about that.
The comfort thing that I was referring to is a little project I'm working on, but I would defer for the ride comfort to Kaz on that question.
He's in listener mode again. I don't know what happened. Maybe he's as a client. I'm not sure. All right. Elias, has Tesla ever reached out to you about the tracker?
I did have one about a year and a half ago.
Can you share the exchange, or would you rather keep it private?
Yeah, the guy no longer works at Tesla, so when they did a lot of the cuts, they cut him off the team. But he specifically said something along the lines of he hadn't seen it before. Somebody shared it with him, and he was like, "This is actually pretty cool." He was a part of the training team for training videos, and I don't know if somebody from Tesla looks at the tracker, but I kind of get the feeling that they do, just from the simple standpoint of seeing a lot of the persistent disengagements, the causation. You can pretty clearly see, especially some of the posts I've done focused data insights on specific issues like lane drift, lane issues, issues with pedestrians, and those kind of things. And we've seen a lot of improvements to a lot of those issues over time. But lane issues has always been like the big one that just kind of just stuck around, and it was a harder problem to solve because of maps and other things. But then the lane drift issue came in 11.4.4, and from 11.4.4 to 11.4.9, like all of us testers are just puzzled, scratching our heads why this car just drives into this lane and just keeps doing it over and over again from version to version. And I know a lot of people have said that's maps issues, but Tesla seems to be paying attention, obviously, to their data. But I just get the feeling, like I said, that one guy that I talked to, other people might be looking at it just from a standpoint of just seeing what other people are reporting. But I even had one guy from Waymo. That one I can share. He retweeted on Tuesday when I posted a weekly update for the FSD tracker. He retweeted basically saying that he was interested in observing and monitoring this progress because he's just overall in general looking at other solutions, and he works for Waymo currently, but he's overall looking at how companies like Tesla can evolve their capabilities to beyond ADAS and into a full self-driving suite.
That's really interesting. That Waymo engineers are keeping a close eye, or at least one of them, on your tracker. Maybe because he wants to see when to cash out of these options.
I think Waymo's
welcome
private,
back.
so I don't think they can cash out.
They still have stock options, right?
Yeah, but it's private, so they'd have to. It's more complicated. I don't think they can easily sell.
If you get a secondary, like a new investor in the company.
Generally in Silicon Valley, while you're still an employee, if you sell the stock, that could violate your employment contract.
I see. Okay. Well, it was a joke anyway. Cause, welcome back.
Yeah, sorry about the connection issues. I came back in as I heard somebody had a question more relevant to me. I didn't hear it though.
Oh, I was asking how you qualify between like preference and like comfort. Like as an example, something you took over because you're driving, but if you were in the back of the car and it was a robotaxi, you wouldn't really care.
I mean, well, to be blunt, that's pretty simple. It has to be discomforting to a point to where, let's see, what's the best way I can put it to make you go like, where the hell did you get your license? I'm not going to take over because there's a little sway or, it might break a little hard. These customers are only getting a disengagement on their drive if I'm perceiving that something is going to like jerk them out of the seat if they weren't wearing a seatbelt. And I'm here to prevent that because, to a lot of people's point, they didn't sign up to be a part of an experiment. So I'm keeping them safe and making sure I get ahead of any scenarios. But that is where I always caveat that when it comes to the robotaxi side of things, it's a very strict metric. And the system may at the last minute have done some corrective action that might have got a 2-star on a self-driving app and the customer just won't come back. Um, experience on the rideshare apps over my desire to be a mad scientist.
Yeah. So my question was like, I think you have a 5-star rating, right? So your
Yeah.
bar must be you disengage if you would have got even a 4-star. So I'm curious, in your mind, what's the threshold of, let's say below 3-star, they never come back, but above 3-star, it's kind of like, it took a little bit longer route than I expected. It made 3 rights instead of a left. It took longer to go through an intersection than I would have liked. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't really find myself needing to disengage for moments like that. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. So there are some cases where I've let the system reroute just because I know the area and I won't consider that a failure. But if it's gonna miss a highway exit, that's pretty bad because sometimes there's traffic or not a way to turn around without adding an extensive amount of time. I haven't really applied. Maybe we'll have to explore ways to elaborate on some of those metrics with a more customer focused orientation, because as it stands right now, I don't give it any tolerance to miss a turn if I can. Sometimes a situation I can't even get ahead of it and we have to reroute, like downtown, and it just happens. Um,
West,
yeah.
West.
Hey, Kaz, your videos are amazing. Love the data. It's very, very conclusive, the things that you're doing. And the more you do them, the more conclusive they become. I'm wondering what comes next for you? Do you think that, I'm realizing you don't have the latest build yet, but when you get the latest build, what are you going to focus on?
Oh, that question's a lot easier to answer. And thanks, by the way, for the kind words. I know at least probably 4 spots that I'll be taking the next build to immediately because I want to see a conclusive fix to the highway gauntlet reentry. Because after the video where it did do it 3 times correctly with the flooded sign and everything, the next customer ride, it botched it. And then the next drive I did in the live stream, it did it right. So I'm looking forward to testing that and getting a 100% success rate. Same with the bike lane right test. On the live stream, it royally screwed up that bike lane right turn with no lead car in both cases, because I know a lot of people brought up the lead car thing. If you haven't seen that live stream, it is about 1 hour and 20 minutes long, but you can kind of scroll up through to the downtown area and see all that. It's shined on some construction and such. But that bike lane turn, the gauntlet reentry point, and La Jolla is actually it's kind of kicking the system's butt right now. I don't know what it is about the La Jolla region. I'm just going to be driving around there more to see how the customer trips perform. But one example, back to Meta's point, I actually considered a failure because I had this older couple going to the hospital in La Jolla, and the system did a fantastic job coming out of a right-hand turn, crossing like 3 lanes to get to the next immediate left, but then failed to actually get in the turn lane. And we were about to be closed out by a car approaching from our rear, and the car's in front. So I had to take over to get us into that lane to make the turn. And hospital trip, that value that is being pretty high up there. So that was a failure condition. I hope that maybe elaborates a little bit more on what Meta was wondering.
Any questions for Elias or Kaz? Please request to speak, or Meta, or Wes, or Macranos. Elias?
Yeah, I was just going to answer Wes's, not Wes, I'm sorry, Meta's question about the comfort thing. So the thing when I replied to you that I have something coming next week, just to give you a sneak peek, one of the people that I follow and he follows me gave me a suggestion that he was messing with it with accelerometer data from your phone and measuring G forces. So I started measuring it in 11.4.9, and then I've been measuring it in 12.3. I'm at like 30 million data points right now. I've run it through a Python script to do some grouping and some threshold parameters that basically will calculate deceleration. And I'm piecing together the data right now. I still have a few more data points to collect. I want to get an even set of data, but I've only been collecting it on my commute. So it's basically the same exact route to and from work. So it's going to be a representative data set of 11.4.9 and 12.3. And then I'll be able to show the smoothness that people keep talking about with 12.3 and basically showing the slowdowns and how the delta between those two versions. So that's coming out next week.
Do you know if the accelerometer data is sensitive enough to tell you about lateral versus horizontal versus, I guess you could just assume lateral is
So
turning.
yes, it does. And I looked at it and it's too much noise. So imagine like your phone is sitting on the little charger holder there. If I turn too sharply, the phone moves, which then adds a little bit of jitter to the data. So there's an X, Y, Z axis that shows the data points for the accelerometer, but it kind of gets wonky. So I only can really use one axis, and I can play around with it a little more, but it's too much noise. I've already looked at it, and it's just kind of like messed up. There's basically only one axis that I could use, and that's the forward and backward motion.
Yeah, I was going to say you might want to do two charts, one for forward backwards, one for left right with the absolute value. And then in theory, you care more about jerk than you care about acceleration. I think anything over 0.6 is considered extremely discomforting, and 0.2 or less is not noticeable. We can double check those numbers on Wiki.
That's actually interesting. I was going to ignore the forward acceleration because I was mostly focused on the slowdowns, but I could take a look at it and see, play around with it and play. It might take me a little bit longer because I've only been focused on deceleration, but I'll have to look at acceleration and left and right movements and see if I can look at overall smoothness, not just slowdowns. So that's an interesting take. I like that.
Yeah, it's like our human brains can detect jerk as discomfort above a certain range, and below a certain range, we can't detect it. The numbers are visible on the web for sure.
Quick extra data point there for Meta, just to add on. So on version 12.3 for customer rides, and just rides in general, I don't think I have any discomfort caused disengagements currently logged.
Yeah, so I guess the mental exercise I'm trying to run through is, if you're always getting 5-star ratings, then the question is it the case that it's so bimodal that people will either give it a 1-star or a 5-star? Or is it actually the case that if you relaxed it a little bit, I'm not saying don't actually do this, but if you were to relax it in a thought experiment, would there be a slight increase in trip completion at 4 and 3-star?
Maybe a little bit. I think I need to get more volume to show that, because currently the trip failures is more so because of an actual technical maneuver, like getting back on course. I'm not really in the comfort realm, but I imagine as I scale up my volume and drive and continue to, that'll be a wider, more robust sample size to show that. But I can absolutely think about there's multiple tiers to the judging of the system by a customer for sure. And I am, of course, testing it at a high level. But yeah, I'd imagine the success rate would go up, as more people are more tolerant to what it's doing.
Yeah, as an example, Waymos drop you off pretty far from your destination. They don't drop you directly where you're supposed to go always. Similarly with the pickups. So there's clearly, if we're just doing a competitive analysis, there's clearly some advantages Tesla has in those situations. But then there's also things like Waymo takes long routes, but it does complete the trips. So arguably at some point, if the goal was to get to robotaxi, you could loosen some of the constraints. Well, some of the constraints you can't loosen at all. Like you can't have people dying.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've been talking to Elias about this too, a little bit, especially more recently, about ways we'll be able to sort of tighten up the metrics, not necessarily making them more strict, but more specific to the robotaxi experience for sure.
Yeah, the accelerometer is like a very good one, right? Because that's like the easy one for data collection. It's a lot harder to do things like distance of stopping and things like that, because there's a discomfort of how close were you to the wall when turning, yet the car might be fully confident that it's in an okay location, but if you're in the driver's seat or the passenger seat and it's the right wall or the left wall, you're gonna have a different level of comfort with how far it is.
All right. Quick note of thank you to Dave Wolf for signing up on Patreon to support the space. If you'd like to join Dave Wolf to support the space, you can do so at the top of your screens. All right. Any other questions for Elias or Cause? Please request to speak. So Meta, are you, based on this data, are you adjusting your estimates of when we're going to get to robotaxis, or Wes? Before that, we have our new supporter of the space on the speaker board, Dave Wolf. Thank you.
You're welcome. Very happy.
Do you have a question for the board?
No, I've been listening, very interested. I've gone over and checked out Elias's page, and so just kind of coming up to speed. So not really a place where I can ask you intelligent questions.
All right, well, welcome. Larry, welcome.
Hi, hey guys, good to be here. How you doing, Yaman?
Good, good. We're discussing the FSD tracker, which shows material improvement in miles to disengagement into the street. So we're trying to understand what it means, what to expect, how the tracker has evolved, etc. I think Wes has a question. Wes?
Oh, I was just going to answer your question, but I can wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems like we're potentially a little bit behind the pace that I thought, but it also could be that we're ahead of the pace that I thought. And what would determine that, I think, are 2 points. One is when we finally hit every vehicle, or like substantial portion of FSD vehicles with 12. So that date, and then the date that they all get updated to the next version. And that's my kind of like key data point. The two things that I think need to happen to see if we're on track. But we could be behind. Why I say that is because, 12.3.2.1 has been a long time coming since Omar got the first build, but we just don't see that trend yet. So that'll be the kind of the sticking point.
Meta?
Do you want me to address Wes's comment specifically, or just calling on me?
I just say your name randomly every now and then for fun. Larry?
I'm just here listening. I don't have a lot to add at this point.
Could I ask a question of Wes?
I'll allow it.
All right, Wes. I know that you're still, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I know that there's still like some hesitance around the data. My question is, if we were to look at the derivative, if you're just looking from one release to the next release, what kind of data do you think you could collect from a public standpoint to glean the rate of bug fixes? Like not improvements from a customer experience, but bug fixes, AKA progress on the March 9th.
Yeah, I mean, just larger sample set, I think, is the easiest way to say that.
Do you think
it does look good right now, but it's not big enough statistically?
Do you think?
Well, you don't actually need it to be that big. Like you can have a pretty small sample as long as it's representative. It can still give you a pretty good window into what the overall fleet looks like, I think.
Yeah, that's the overall problem, though. It's mostly California.
Yeah, I mean that's the hard thing is knowing what is representative, right? We don't have a breakdown of so like let's say it's working really well in California, but most of the users are in California. So it's kind of hard to know, okay, if you can, you can have a few hundred people even. And as long as the sample matches the overall population sufficiently, then you can actually draw some pretty strong conclusions.
I was going to make the
Yeah,
opposite argument. If you slice the data by region, if you group the data by intervention type somehow, um, wouldn't that give you like the distinct number of issues by region, and then you would know if FSD is able to do robotaxi in a given region? AKA the March of Nines is a different race in each region.
yeah, but that would also demonstrate that you don't have a good generalized solution, right? So you might not want to pursue that if it isn't generalized.
No, that's not necessarily the case. It just might be that you started the race earlier in California and everything else is still improving, but there's the set of things you need to solve in California has if you intersect that with another region, there's stuff left over, right? So
Yeah, that's generally, I would agree with that. If the set of conditions are materially different in California than they are in an adjourning state. But I honestly I would doubt that, and I wouldn't really want to pursue that because it seems like that might be a high noise category to go after to determine if you're going to widen or not, or you're going to focus on fixing the issues that you're seeing in California. But I don't think that we're there. It doesn't show me that we're there because of the 2-lane roundabout issue looks solved. And you just don't really have those in California that I'm aware of. I haven't really seen any videos of, complex 2-lane roundabouts. So the fact that that is solved and it's never been solved before leads me to believe that this is a generalized solution.
yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to make a statement about it not being a generalized solution. I was trying to say, what is if push came to shove and you had to try and force robotaxi, it was like mission critical, you had to get it out as soon as possible. Let's say Waymo has suddenly got millions of cars arriving from somewhere and they're about to deploy everywhere. You kind of have to get it out quickly. What are the metrics you would be looking for to say it's actually the March of Nines is achievable in the following areas?
Yeah, it's just miles to critical disengagement.
Let's get what Omar has to say. Omar?
It's going to become plainly obvious over the next few point releases, as the autopilot team has said, that critical disengagements are trending downwards. And it won't take a rocket scientist or a statistical genius to analyze it. It's going to be so obvious. Everyone will be able to see it. So the problem with the old architecture was that any change you made to the planning and control code to decrease disengagements in one situation could actually cause other disengagements in other situations, right? So, like the lane drift issue, for example, was probably a fix for some other issue that had unintended consequences in some other place. So, this is why you would see some noise. And this is why it's kind of hard to track and why who you're asking matters a lot because they tended to be kind of biased towards their own area and then you just it's just sort of endemic to the nature of code, to the to the nature of this software 1.0 thing. Now with the software 2.0 approach, you can actually show it all the things you need it to do, and you don't have to keep it in your head as a programmer. You just sort of train on it, and it can discover an optimal solution that works for all the cases much better. So this is why I think you're going to start to see a trend downwards. And I can tell you from what I've seen 12.1, 12.2, 12.3, it's remarkable. Each build fixes a good like chunk of issues, if not the majority of the issues I'm seeing with the prior build. So I think when you just look at the autopilot team's comments, 12.4, 12.5, they've already rolled out AutoPark. They're rolling out Smart Summon next. It's going to be obvious on this tracker and any tracker that anybody does, Kaz's videos, anybody's videos, that it's actually getting better and
it's getting better across the country. Right now, it still sucks. It's still requiring disengagement for really predictable and consistent issues sometimes. But what we're going to see in the coming months is that you'll have to get into a really, really weird situation for it to require a takeover.
Wes.
Question for Omar. You saw this stopping for a traffic light when you were at a different intersection with the first build. I'm curious to know, and I don't think you have. I don't think you've seen that again. Is that correct?
They fixed that in 12.2. And
Sorry. Go ahead, Omar.
they fixed it in 12.2, and I first saw it in 12.1. So first build after I noticed it, it was fixed.
And this is a key data point. And why I say that is because you clearly saw it, and now it's clearly gone, and nobody else has experienced this. And I think that is very material to the robustness of the solution, because that was a big regression, honestly. And now that it's gone, I think it's really important that it's gone. And we're seeing other things that look like they're gone as well. And I'm really happy with that progression. And if you have anything to add to that, I'd be interested to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, these look like big regressions, but they're really just sort of minor oversights in the training set that are relatively easy to fix. We have kind of this intuition of these bugs from before, but the process of fixing them before is very different than the process of fixing them now.
Yeah. Okay, we have Elias on the board who created the FSD tracker for those of you who just joined. If you have a question for Elias or a comment, feedback, please request to speak because he has to leave in a little bit. Let's get Dave's question first. Dave.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to direct this towards Elias, but it's kind of a comment, but I'd kind of like to hear his feedback on it. One of the things I can see, we got a lot of people in this space right now, and there's a need, in my opinion, for more data for the tracker. If I look at it, you've got 321 miles between critical disengagements, and we're looking between versions, 3,000, 5,000 miles. As that number starts to go up, we'll still have, if we have the same amount of miles being tracked between releases, the granularity or the sample size becomes too small to get the resolution to be able to see the number of miles. So 321, if it goes up by a factor of 10, let's say, over the next 6 months to a year, now you're at 3,000 miles between critical disengagement. So I think there's a real need for more people to participate. And if you look forward beyond where we're at today, which I believe the tracker shows real good data, it's showing us something which we're not getting elsewhere. But if we're looking as you go forward to robotaxi, 100,000 miles, the size of this needs to grow significantly as far as data on a tool,
Right.
with a tool that's going to be able to see something.
Elias,
Anyways, that's it.
we got your point. Elias?
Yeah, Dave, thanks for those comments. For those that don't know, Dave and I have been talking since October 2021. It feels like yesterday, but he was the one that was following me, one of the first people to follow me when I was posting a table on data. And he also recommended pushing to the community tracker. So I just want to say thanks to Dave for just being there and talking through stuff and bouncing ideas off of you. It's really great to meet awesome people like you and Kaz and Edge Case and all those other people. But yeah, definitely agree that we need to get more people. The data will at some point, especially if we're jumping from version to version every 2-3 weeks, we're going to need more people in order to truly see the scale that it grows to. If we want to be able to see how many thousands of miles it can go to a critical disengagement or any disengagement. I know it's hard to collect data, so I get the aspect of how much work goes into it. So I know not everybody is capable or able to put in the work to do it, and it's fine. Not mad or anything like that. It's just the people pushing it out, like, what happened today, that's great. Getting people to look at the data and be interested, and maybe join. That's all. I'm all for it, and I'm all for helping
How
people.
should people reach out to you if they want to
Yeah.
help out? How should they reach out to you? You're on mute.
Yeah, people can reach out to me anytime.
Okay. Meta, then Machine, then Wes, then Cause.
What we need to be cautious of here is this notion that there won't be regressions. All emergent behavior that is not covered in their eval set could regress. So when they fix something, let's say they fix a double lane roundabout thing, but they weren't targeting that explicitly, that could regress in the future. I'm just saying that now so that when it happens in the future, people don't come back and say, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen. It's just that the amount of regression should be less over time, as long as it's the things that they're focusing on and they add it to their eval sets. Those eval sets grow, and those things are less and less likely to regress. The important thing of the shift is that it can now do balancing of trade-offs. That's not something branching logic does well. Neural nets are better at trade-off choices, and most of the driving situations of like to be aggressive, not be aggressive, go, don't go, when to cut over, those are all trade-off choices. And so that's why neural nets are a better fit for that.
Elias, quick question for you. When people are, do you need a specific, like for example, is it more helpful if somebody's in Northeast that joins the tracker, or somebody who drives for Uber, or a specific type of model, for example, or anybody who joins is helpful for the tracker?
Yeah, anything is helpful. It just helps give different perspectives, because I know not everybody has the same experience, and there's some areas that are more complicated than others. So it's just different perspectives just helps the data be more robust.
Okay. Machine?
I agree with what Dave said, obviously, about evaluation. Will get more difficult, this little limited data set, as we go on. The difference between one disengagement happening or not, when you're trying to evaluate, are we at 50,000 miles per disengagement or 10,000, can totally change the number. And it's actually also along the lines of training set becomes more difficult as the software improves and you're trying to collect more data. Those data points are becoming less and less frequent in people's routines. So it's a good thing.
I lost Machine. Do you guys hear him?
I lost him too.
For time as well. And then last, I just want to ask Elias, who's your favorite speaker?
And he just left. Good job, Machine. You scared him away.
That timing was impeccable.
So, oh, there he is.
And if I recall,
He's
Yaman
coming
said
back.
Elias had tons of time, so he didn't leave because he had to leave.
Exactly.
I mean, I've only participated in 2 base. But still,
I know it was a little bit garbled, Machine, but I think he said Wes is his favorite speaker.
Or I think I heard Yaman, but yeah. That's so funny.
Hey guys, I need to take this chance to say my goodbyes too, and Matt, thanks to everyone and for all the feedback, the tracker, and the report over the years. I can take any last questions. I just got to get to this VA appointment here real soon. So, thank you so much for all the support.
Thank you, Cos. Thank you, Elias. Xander?
I just want to say, Yaman, thank you so much for what you do here in this space. Omar, oh no, not that guy. Larry coming up, and Wes, and Meta. Like these are amazing speakers. You do a great job, Yaman. Thank you for curating such a wonderful space. And you got to get rid of that pretend comedian, though.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. If you all want to support the space, like Dave Wolf just joined, you can do so at the top of your screens through the Patreon link. Thank you, Xander. Wade, go ahead.
Thanks for the space. I had a question for Xander and I think Kaz is still on. Terrific work on seeing the progress with the data and everything that you guys do. My question was your users that are filling out the surveys. Can you share what percentage are in California and what percentage outside California? What percentage male, female, and any other characteristics that helps us better glean insight from your data? Thanks.
Well, shoot, I think that's a better question for Elias. I know he had to leave too. My expertise is more on my dashboard, focusing on my single but quite large sample size. That's what she said. Sorry, had to. I'm sure he can glean.
You can't dyslexic for yourself. That's against the rules of the space.
Well, I just Michael Scotted myself, I guess. But no, yeah, that's definitely. I would hit up Elias on that question. I'm sure he can glean all that information. That dashboard is incredible. My side is more so just focused on me and on what I do with customers with the rideshare space and robotaxis. So feel free to hit me up for any questions on that. That is going to have to be it for me, guys. Thank you, Yaman, and everyone for allowing me to be up here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kaz, for stopping by. Welcome anytime. All right, Omar, it's you and me. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm pretty happy, pretty optimistic about what's going on. Loving my Cybertruck, loving FSD 12. I'm really excited to try the new auto park when I get back to San Francisco on Sunday.
Yeah, the videos look really, really good. The wife of the early Tesla was saying that they tried about a handful of times and it's been perfect every single time.
Yeah, pretty exciting. So now you can not only FSD to your destination, but have it park for you too, which is great. So that's just one more step eliminated. Now all that's left is Smart Summon shipping in April, and they're going to be essentially feature complete. Summon the car, go to your destination, park, and do it again.
Yeah. How far do you think FSD is from, you kind of pull up to the mall, get out of the car, and tell it to park itself, and it just goes, and you don't have to be there?
Um, I don't know. I mean, maybe a year or two.
Yeah, a year or two. So let's assume for a second that the vehicle, like let's say it's a well-lit, the lines are perfect parking lot at a Costco or whatever. You kind of pull up, get out of the car, you tell it to go park itself. So the technology is there. Let's say it's capable of doing so. What other considerations do you think are required for it to happen? Like, do you think Costco will have to allow it? Do you think we're going to have to get permission at a national level or local level? How do you think about that?
Well, it's actually legal to drive in a parking lot without a driver, assuming you're watching the car. So Smart Summon is obviously legal today, even in its incredibly shitty state. It is legal, and people just sort of don't use it because it's so embarrassing in situations like Costco where it wouldn't work. But we can start to see the underlying capabilities of the system. We've seen, for example, FSD Beta be able to drive into parking lots, and in some cases, even just sort of park itself. So that looks like a good ability. We've seen, okay, someone pulls out in the parking lot, it handles it. There's a pedestrian walking by, it handles it. It has that foundation for driving into the parking lot. Now, with the introduction of Auto Park, we have the ability for the car to park itself in a more sort of intentional way. The user's actually picking the spot, whereas in the previous versions of FSD 12, it would kind of just jump into a spot, like sometimes even a handy cap spot, but it would sometimes do it, it sometimes wouldn't. So this new auto park system where the driver's actually picking which spot they want it to park in, and then it's going to park, and it seems like they've actually got the parking step down, both for perpendicular parking and parallel parking. So that's good. We got the driving in the parking lots looking pretty good. Not intervention free, but pretty good. We've got the parking looking pretty good. Again, I'm sure it's not 100% intervention free, but it's looking pretty good. They're going to continue to grind down on that. And we're going to start off with it being supervised, meaning you have to be in the car while it goes and you pick the spot and it parks. Then in time, it'll start really being able to pick the spot itself. They'll give it the training data. They'll show it all the spots the user picked, and it'll sort of figure out how to pick a good spot just by looking at what spot the user's picked. And then, once it never fails, so you should be able to see in the fleet, oh, no one is ever taking over to correct it. Then yeah, just let it do it without a driver. You have the legally you can do it. We've seen it with Smart Summon. And if the reliability of the software is there, then yeah, go ahead and park without, supervision. But of course, it's sort of something where if you have an error and you bump into someone's car, it could be quite expensive or damage your car. So you really want to make sure that the reliability is there before you do it. But we see the pieces there. They're starting to ship now. So I think it's conceivable that within a year or two, it could do it without supervision. Or even you are still supervising it, but you can get out of the car before it goes and parks itself. I mean, that is something that you've been able to do with Tesla for some time with the old dumb summon. You could say, okay, go park in this space, just pull forward or pull backward. Very simple auto, summon maneuver. And you can get out of the car and it can do it. So you should be able to do that with auto park soon too, I think.
Great, thank you. We have Ken in YouTube live chats who is saying parking lots for the most part are private property. The owner can prohibit autonomous cars if they want. Okay, interesting. I mean, can you imagine though, like if a business allowed because the vehicles to park themselves? I think we'd have a number of Tesla owners go to that parking lot specifically. Let's see, Ken's coming up. And then Larry is in listening mode. He's welcome to come up and chat about the stuff a little bit too. Ken, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, parking lots for the most part are private property. So if you have like a shopping mall, the parking area is generally owned by the person who owns the shopping mall. They set the rules and limits within the parking lot. So if they wanted to, they could theoretically prohibit cars from autonomous parking if they wanted to. It's the same reason why Walmart can, in their parking lot, say no overnight trucking allowed, right? You have to pull in during normal business hours. You can't sleep overnight. It's the same concept. Is it going to happen? I don't know. But parking lots aren't quote unquote public property.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that insight. Hey, while I have you on the board, we haven't talked about Elon's compensation lately. Is there any updates on that front?
The scheduling order came out and Richard posted it on X. I can't remember his X name, but the scheduling order came out. So they have briefs coming and going until the first week of July. And that's going to be when they argue the attorney's fee provision, whether or not it goes, whether or not it goes through or not. That's the argument date. First, I think it's July 8th, if I recall correctly. So that's the next big, really important date. But the really most important date is the case before that. I had mentioned this before, the Detroit Police and Fire Retirement Fund versus Tesla, because she's considering the same question. She has to decide whether or not the options that were given back by the board of directors are going to be valued at the inflated price or the original option price. So whichever way she decides that is going to be a big roadmap for how she's going to decide Elon's compensation case.
Interesting. Thank you very much
Yep.
for giving us an update on that. How do you expect it to play out in the coming months? What do you think is the most likely scenario here?
Well, I think he's going to appeal without a doubt. That's just the way Elon is. And then, of course, from that point forward, the interest meter starts running on the 500 and, or the $50 billion, $55 billion judgment. So the 500, they're the 5.5 billion attorney's fees judgment starts, or interest starts rolling. And that's what, $1.65 billion a day in judgment. So if Elon wants to cut costs, hey, settle this case and stop that judgment clock, because that's what, over $500 million a year that you're wasting just on interests. That's a big chunk of change.
Interesting. Thank you. Omar, any comments on that topic?
Yeah, they're probably going to appeal. I can't see them not appealing just because it could cost money if they lose.
Got it. Any questions for Ken or Omar? Please request to speak. Omar, did you see Kim Kardashian posted a set of photos on Instagram? 364 million followers, photos of the Cybertruck.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Do you think Tesla is requesting these posts? It was like a condition of getting the Cybertruck early?
No.
So she's doing it out of her own. Okay, interesting. Machine.
I mean, the reason that you see all these rappers putting Cybertruck in their music video and Kim Kardashian photographing it on Instagram is because Cybertruck just, it attracts attention. Whether you love it or you hate it, people are commenting under those posts. And the job of Kim Kardashian or The Weeknd or whoever is to get people to watch them, to talk about them, to follow them. That's how they make their money. So the Cybertruck is just sort of a no-brainer way to get engagement, and I think that's why you're seeing it be so popular.
Thank you. Machine.
Omar is the Kim Kardashian of the Tesla community.
Is that all you wanted to say? Is that why you came up?
No, I just pivoted.
How was their meeting?
It was uneventful. Just like the space.
Yeah.
I wanted to come up and compliment. I wish
I'm actually. Who are you going to compliment?
I was just going to compliment all the different speakers that you bring up on this space. Like everyone has like some different area of expertise. I think it's really valuable. We have like Wes with a lot of technical capabilities, project management in chips and a lot of technology development. Omar with his FSD drives. We just had on this guy. What was his name? The guy who was just up. Who's like some law background, but he's able to get us insight. Chen on.
Yeah, Chen is great. He's been in this space. My go-to on these matters, and then on YouTube Live, he's very active too. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, we have a lot of different good backgrounds with high expertise.
Yeah, and we have you for how to take shirtless, oiled up photos.
I was not oiled up in the picture.
And then you sweat too much.
No, it's not shiny. What are you talking about? Just anyway. I was gonna ask something. So I posted today. Maybe this will bring Larry up here if he's available. I posted today a what's next for Tesla stock price, $200 or $150. and it was pretty much 50-50 in expectations. What do you think?
I don't have high confidence, like for sure one is going to come before the other. My slant, of course, is that I do think something close to 150 will happen over the course of the next month. But 200 could happen too. I mean, there's a lot of excitement right now around FSD.
I mean, if you see the replies in that poll, to that poll, everyone is talking about how PND will pose a drop in the stock. I'm like, well, if everyone's expecting that, you know.
Yeah, I don't think P&D might not, because everyone's expecting that, but historically, if Tesla has lower earnings in a quarter, unless the earnings call has some really bullish tone, this stock sells off. That's just historically what happens, unless there was, some reason that was outside of Tesla's control, like the Shanghai shutdown. Just having low earnings, especially if it's lower than expected, never plays well. That's really the basic thinking. But you're right. If everyone thinks that, then it's not going to happen, because everyone's waiting to buy in. And so they'll start buying in if it drops, let's say, in the 160s. And then, yeah, it may never happen. So I'm not predicting with high confidence, but that's where I'm thinking.
We have exactly 420 votes in the poll. So you picked which one? Pick one.
Well, I didn't vote. I didn't see the poll, but I would pick 150.
150. That's 47.8% of the people said 150. 52.2 said 200. Do you have any thoughts on macro? Any updated thoughts?
Not really. I don't know what's changed. Yeah, I've given my thoughts on inflation and interest rates before. I don't know if there's been any new information that's changing anything for me. I'm curious to see if there's anything that happens with the Baltimore port shutdown in terms of supply chain, but I don't even
Everyone, the people I look at say it's it's an important, unfortunate event, but it's not going to have macroeconomic implications.
Yeah, so that's probably true.
Yeah, the implications, I think, will be localized. It's highly dependent on the individual company and what their supply chain looks like.
Yeah, Ford CFO came out real quick. I mean, within a matter of hours, they said we're impacted. Wow. Okay. Have you tried to find a solution? Tesla hasn't come out yet.
Next, they're going to say that's why they had to cut F-150 Lightning production.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you guys see Larry as a speaker, or are we having a situation?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Now I can.
Interesting. I still can't see him as a speaker.
Maybe it's my fault again because I'm the desktop.
All right. Well, why don't you? Okay. You just download the freaking app. What is the matter with this?
Yeah, let's see.
Why
I'm gonna
don't you-
exit. I'm gonna
Why don't
exit.
you do?
Don't try to peer pressure me. I'm gonna exit, and let's see if he's able to come up then.
But I want to have both of you on the board. Larry, can you try to come up again, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. So
Oh
here's
man,
the problem.
yeah, I don't know what happened, but got cut off badly. Yeah, so I don't have a lot to talk about other than just enjoying my Cybertruck. Man, it's a blast. It's the best car I've ever owned. I mean, not by a little, by a lot. And I've owned some really good cars. It's an amazing vehicle. I just don't know how they did it, but my gosh. I just don't know how they did it, but my gosh. I was saying the other day, I really hope that the new platform is based upon the same method of construction, because it is incredibly comfortable, incredibly quiet, I mean, it's just a great car, And the steering is, I'm telling you, it's like a whole different world. I only wish I could get my FSD onto it, and then my world is made. But I'm going overseas for 3 months. I'm not going to be able to drive the thing. I'm so bummed. I'm going to have to drive a Model 3 for all 3 months. It's such a pity. But
thank you, Larry. Any questions? So we have a couple of people. Both Omar and Larry have a Cybertruck. Any Cybertruck questions, please request to speak. Also, if you're on YouTube Live, please let me know if you can hear us. Machine?
Yeah, Larry, I wonder, do you have dreams of your younger years driving the Cybertruck like Mad Max in the outback, in the bush? Is that your dream?
not really. Good thought, but I don't. Yeah, it would have been nice to have owned that Cybertruck when I was young and crazy. Yeah, I think I would have killed myself in it, though. Although I don't know if you can kill. I would have killed a lot of people. I don't know. It's a great truck.
I think that's the quote of the day for the space. It was Larry, quote, I would have killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is like they describe, like,
yeah,
it's just so smooth. It's incredible.
Yeah. I watched the Doug DeMuro review, and the guy, he puts his foot down and it kind of takes off a little bit. And he said, yeah, one's so used to the electric. But I bet you he was on chill mode, because it comes in chill mode. Its default setting is chill mode. He probably had it in chill mode, because when you put that thing, when you dial it up, it really does take off. Man, it's something.
Yeah, it's a Tesla, all right.
Yeah. And when you're in such a huge car and you get that kind of performance, it's somehow there's more to it. Somehow there's more adrenaline that pumps, just because of the bloody size of the thing. Yeah. So,
did you have a question?
Hey, I got a quick question. I'm on a desktop, so I don't have a hands-on button. What do you guys make of the Doug DeMuro's Cybertruck score, Doug score? That's just 1 point higher than the second place.
Well, it's pretty high already. I mean, it's higher than the Plaid. It's higher than the Rivian. I mean, everything's subjective, right? Everything's subjective. And so there may be some aspects. For example, he downrated the automatic action of the frunk, because he said it would cut your leg off. But actually, Dirty Tesla showed that he put his leg in and he closed the frunk, used the automatic close on the frunk, and it wasn't bad at all. I mean, he survived without a broken leg or a cut off leg. So, and also, of course, he didn't do the launch with, he did the launch in chill mode. So, but it's all subjective. There's nothing objective about it. I think subjectively, though, I have to say this is the vehicle of the century to date, and maybe of last century as well, in my view. I think the steer-by-wire is so revolutionary. And I happen to think the low voltage, the 48-volt system is revolutionary, but of course you don't actually experience that. But if you take the technology that they've put into this truck and the revolutionary nature of the technology, which you have to judge as well, because it's kind of built into the pricing, it's built into the functional capability. I mean, there's a very significant gap between this vehicle and any other vehicle on the road. I can't see any other vehicle getting, within 20% of its, if it's scored objectively. I'll tell you what amazes me about it. What amazes me about it is how incredible they've made the experience. Now, I haven't seen the P&L on this truck yet, and yet the production rate is rising at such a rapid rate. Actually, it's rising to my expectations, which are way above the markets. I'm thinking they're going to end up close to 100,000 trucks delivered this year. People poo-pooed it, but if you look at the rate of increase of manufacture, they're at a point now of 50,000 trucks, a production rate of 50,000 trucks a year. There's no doubt in my mind at all that they will be able to be at a rate of 200,000 trucks a year by the last quarter, which will put them very close, if not at the 100,000 trucks. So we'll get a really good view of the P&L on this truck. So unless they've really done their sums badly, which is not Elon's way at all, it's not Tesla's way at all, I think they're going to hit the ball right out of the park on this one. It's going to be a big upside surprise, but don't expect it.
Yeah, I was going to come out yesterday. I think I agree with Larry that I don't know exactly what the production rate's exactly at, 50,000 annualized right now, but I think it is close, because if you looked at the VIN data Troy was fitting on, and then the new data points we have from even people in the space yesterday mentioning what their VIN numbers were. And I think I was looking at the graph and trying to fit and thinking, yeah, this thing is getting close to 1,000 per week. And if they end up, it's 2,000 by the end of Q2, and then they're like 3,000 to 4,000 each quarter. Like, I think you're going to get close to 100,000. And then I would agree, then probably assuming the margins are solid on this thing, that you're going to get a surprise to the upside in terms of its earnings contribution, Q3, Q4.
Right. Could I add one more thing to that?
Of course.
I have an excellent source on this, and that is the production rate. Shouldn't have said it, but I said it.
Is it Elon?
Can you say that one more time?
Probably not.
We'll have to check the tape on that one. Wes?
I think your review is great, and Doug's review is pure marketing. It's pure subjectivity. I agree with that. He's mostly selling his website. But at the end of the day, you actually are experiencing 48 volt because that steering isn't possible without it. It requires a lot of power, and you can only deliver that with a 48 volt system. So I really do think that you're spot on with that. It is absolutely revolutionary. And I do think that the next version of the vehicle that Tesla makes will absolutely have it. So kudos.
Larry, what are some of the most common reactions you get from people when they see the Cybertruck in person? Larry, you're on mute. Machine, would you like to speak for Larry?
Yeah, can you imagine? I don't know where he lives in North Carolina, but he's driving around with this tinted out Cybertruck, and all these North Carolina people are probably thinking, "What famous rapper is that?" And then he drops down the window and he's like, "Good day, mate."
The most common reaction I get is a thumbs up, especially other Tesla drivers. You see them kind of pull up beside you, give you a thumbs up, smile. You got to smile back. It kind of reminds me of the early days of Tesla when all the Model 3 owners were waving to each other. Um, the reactions are all overwhelmingly positive. Kids want to see it, people want to take a look, people just want to ask you about it. I haven't gotten one negative reaction yet. Presumably the negative people are just keeping to themselves and not getting confrontational. But the reaction from pretty much anybody who sees it is just universally positive. People are just excited to see one in real life.
Have you had any traditional like F-150 owners trying to race you?
No, not race me, but you do see quite a few truck owners looking over at it and just kind of wondering what it is. I do think, Tesla's just being very underestimated right now. You hear this narrative that, oh, growth in EVs is over. And oh my God, look at Legacy Auto. They've done so badly. Nobody wants EVs. Well, nobody wants a Legacy Auto EV, but Tesla had their best sales year ever last year. And you know what? I bet this year is going to beat that. So I think this year is going to be their highest delivery year ever. So they're not, they're continuing to grow, even though we've seen high interest rates, all these economic headwinds, everything that's going on in China, every company in the world and every startup get into the EV game. You're now seeing a few, the Chinese smartphone makers and everything, and they're still continuing to grow. And to say that consumers don't want EVs, they're not ready, it's not going to grow is really just so laughable to me. I mean, it's clear we're really at the beginning here. And this next wave of products that is reaching price parity with gas cars, even down to the 25K level, I mean, it's just going to be game over. You look at the Cybertruck, as they ramp up production and they get this thing down to 60,000, which is 53K after the tax credit, which they'll fully qualify for, even when nobody else does. This thing is just an incredible vehicle. I mean, it's going to be insanely popular. It's going to be a hit. When you compare how it drives to how a F-150 Lightning drives, it's like a day and night difference. It's like, it- a modern smartphone versus an Atari in a sense. And with FSD and everything, FSD 12 running on this thing, game over. So as they ramp up production and get the price down, this thing is going to be insanely popular. They're essentially going from a product, so your typical Tesla customer that's a Model Y buyer, they're looking at a purchase that's, 40K, maybe up to 60K, depending on the configuration they get. Whereas the Cybertruck really starts at 60K, and there's 80K versions and even more expensive, super performance versions like the Cyber Beast. So I think you could push the ASP up quite a bit in a way that is actually higher than the increase in costs. Let's not forget that they've got this 4680 structural pack here. Although it is a bigger pack, they're making it in Texas, which qualifies them for the $45 a kilowatt hour IRA subsidies. So there is a potential for the cost to not be that much more than the Model Y, but for the ASP to be quite a bit higher. And for people to be more likely to choose those higher trims, the long range and the performance, because they want to do towing use cases or things like that. So, I mean, you think about the growth of the Cybertruck, you think about the growth of the new Model 3, the upgraded Model Y when it comes, and then of this next gen platform, which is going to have 48 volt, it's going to have steer by wire, it's going to have a lot of these technologies, have that driving feel of the Cybertruck that feels so advanced and like nothing else on the market, have FSD, but also be at this price point that's half the cost to produce of the Model 3 and Y. So you think about this, and to say, oh, I think they're done growing. I mean, it's just laughable if you take a long term view. Yeah, okay, if you look at Q1, not every quarter is going to be a huge growth quarter. They're kind of at a place right now where they're in between a few product waves. The 3 and Y have ramped up. there's not really anything to do cutting the price further on those. We're sort of ramping up the new Model 3. We don't have the new Model Y yet. A lot of people are waiting for those. Cybertruck, a lot of people want that, but it's still ramping up. The next gen platform isn't on the market yet. So it's a little bit of a lull, but don't let that confuse you into thinking the
Yeah.
roadmap doesn't have huge growth.
Larry, are you still there? All right. Machine, are you impressed by the auto park videos that are going around?
Yeah.
Seems to be
those are
highly
great.
accurate. It's very
Yeah.
highly accurate. Would you use it? Because I know your parking skills are lacking in California.
Not yet. I mean, I
If
saw
they're not-
some a little off. My skills are perfect, like exactly 50% wheelbase between the lines. But I think
Bullshit.
eventually.
I know in your wide parking spaces in California suburbs, Atherton. Sorry, the which place was the next to Atherton?
What was it called? Which place is what?
Where you live?
What?
You live next to Atherton, right? Close
Oh,
to
Atherton. Yeah. There's no
But you're
parking
not-
space in Atherton. There's no
You're not
lines.
there.
Redwood City.
Redwood City, that's right.
Yeah. There's narrow
What do you mean
spots.
no
here.
lines?
The Popeyes, the parking spot place there, which Omar did see, they're very narrow. So that's a good place.
Were you in a Popeyes commercial recently?
No, I was thinking though I should be, given my experience being in commercials. And
Well, there's a video going around with your sound recording.
Wait, what?
It sounded very realistic. I thought maybe you were considering a career change.
I don't know what you're referring to, but in similar news, I just got an email from an actual Tesla employee recruiting me to come or apply for a job for managing the Powerwall Megapack algorithms. And maybe I'll apply. And I was just thinking, like, imagine that I'm in charge of like this immediate response that the Megapack has to produce the right power and frequency to support some grid. And I'm over here coding the algorithm and I spill like a spicy chicken with sauce on my keyboard and it adds a few like zeros to some code. And it just totally fails the software and everything fails for like the Australian grid. Like this is possible, folks. This could be possible if I get the job.
They didn't think you were good enough for the autopilot team.
Well, that's probably true. First of all, I'm not good enough for the autopilot team.
Yeah, I'm not either. So
And but also like they don't need a recruiter for the autopilot team. I mean, they recruit the top people, right? But everyone else is probably applying. That's the sexy thing. No one's going to go in and saying, "Oh, I really want to work on Megapack algorithms." So they got to, recruit people more for that.
Thank you to Dave Wolf and Redo Segrist for just joining Patreon. If you'd like to support the space, if you enjoy the space, you may chip in at patreon.com. The link is at the top of the screens. Thanks, Dave Wolf and Redo Segrist. Omar, can you
We got a
elaborate
new-
on? Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say we have a new article from Bloomberg about the next gen platform from Dana Hall.
Yeah, tell us.
What were you going to ask first?
It's just a more general question about the autopilot team. I was going to ask you to elaborate on why you think you're not good enough. Like, what does that mean exactly? But let's focus on this article for a second. And the link is at the top of the screens.
Yeah, do you want to read it, or I could read it if you want? I haven't read it yet.
Go ahead, please.
Right. Tesla's $25,000 car means tossing out the 100-year-old assembly line. A new unboxed production system could slash costs in half if the EV maker can actually pull it off. Tesla has a plan to fend off cheaper competition from China with a $25,000 electric car. But first, it has to overhaul a 100-year-old manufacturing process pioneered by Henry Ford. So this is really material. Everybody's talking about competition from China, BYD. This could change all of that. If they have a material advantage in the production system, obviously it's a risk, but it could let them hit a cost level others can't. The company is moving to what it calls an unboxed approach, which is more like building Legos than a traditional production line. Instead of a large rectangular car moving along a linear conveyor belt, parts are assembled simultaneously in dedicated areas and then put all together at the end. Tesla says the change could reduce manufacturing footprints by more than 40%, allowing the car maker to build future plants far faster and at less expense. If the new assembly process is successful, Tesla says it can slash production costs in half. That'll be key to delivering a cheap enough car to stoke demand that's slowed as of late and pressured the electric car maker stock price. Tesla shares are down 28% so far year to date, compared to a 10% increase in the S&P 500 during the same period. If we're going to scale the way we want to, we have to rethink manufacturing again, said Lars. The problem is that investors haven't heard many details about how Tesla has progressed since then, even as Chinese automakers have slashed costs and Detroit car makers have often refocused their efforts on cheaper models. On the company's most recent earnings call, Elon Musk stuck to generalities, saying only that Tesla was very far along on making a cheaper car, which is slated to start production at the end of next year. While he mentioned the new revolutionary manufacturing system, calling it far more advanced than any automotive manufacturing system in the world by a significant margin, he didn't elaborate. Musk is notorious for missing deadlines, and some on Wall Street are dubious that Musk can meet his already delayed timeline. He first teased a $25,000 EV all the way back in 2020, much less the savings Tesla targets. Tesla's method is unproven and may come with its own efficiencies and risks. A recent analysis by Bloomberg Intelligence estimated that the new modular manufacturing process would cut costs by 33%, not half. Tesla didn't respond to requests for comments. In the absence of details, some people are taking it upon themselves to figure out how well the system might work. Matthew Vachaparamelpil, CEO of Caresoft, an engineering and automotive benchmarking firm, said his company's engineers spent 200,000 hours building a digital replica of Tesla's unboxed platform. They found that Musk's ambitions are technically possible, and he says that it would make huge financial sense if achieved. Ford's legacy. Most mass market automakers still largely adhere to the same basic setup used by Henry Ford in 1913 to make the Model T. Stamp panels are put together in a framing station and welded into a rectangular box-shaped cars. Doors are put on. The vehicle then goes through the paint shop, either dipped into a big vat or sprayed or dried in large ovens. The freshly painted doors are taken off. Wiring and engine and motors are dropped in. Seats and other parts of the interior are put in. The glass windshields and windows are added. The doors come back right on before the final inspection. That process, Tesla executives say, is rife with inefficiencies. Moving a car-sized box through the factory takes up a lot of space. Painting an entire machine, instead of just the panels that need it, takes time and wastes energy. And working off a huge hulking frame means only a few people can assemble their parts at a given time. The unbox method doesn't require a big skeleton of a machine to move through a factory. Instead, splitting off into small groups, workers labor on various components of a vehicle simultaneously before it comes together at a single point of final assembly. The potential cost savings are substantial, according to Caresoft. Caresoft sees at least a 50% reduction in the paint shop investment alone in new factories. Paint has long been the most expensive part of any auto plant. The high heat required for automotive paint is energy intensive, and there are strict emissions requirements. Throughput of the paint shop largely determines a plant's total output, according to auto plant executives. A typical car body is 6 feet wide and 15 feet long. Instead of sending the entire rectangular body through a paint shop, Tesla's unbox process will just paint the actual panels before the car is assembled. The unbox method has plenty of risks of its own, mainly that it's unproven and requires shifting to a new assembly process, which could lead to production delays. But it's not the first time Tesla has made significant changes to improved long-held manufacturing processes. With its Model Y, instead of stamping various pieces of the car, Tesla turned to die casting machines to gigacast the front and rear of the vehicle. That eliminated the need for hundreds of parts and welds. Other automakers are working to fend off competition by the Chinese. Ford is exploring a compact EV that would use a cheaper battery. The concern is that the lower end of the automotive market isn't currently being served by electric vehicles, but they will be served by China if US companies can't cut costs, said Susan Helper, a professor at Case Western. But Musk's company has an edge over longtime automakers in adapting to novel, potentially cheaper manufacturing techniques. Tesla's factories are newer than most. Some aren't even under construction yet, so they can more easily and cheaply tailor its facilities to run on cutting edge manufacturing methods. That doesn't mean it's easy. The company's warned investors it's between two major growth waves, as demand for Model 3 and Y, both of which have been out for years, tops out. Tesla delivered 1.8 million cars last year, but aims to deliver 20 million cars by 2030. To do that, it will need to develop much cheaper cars. That's it.
Thank you, Omar. Machine, now I would like you to summarize this in 5 sentences. Go ahead.
You want me to summarize it?
Did you listen to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next gen car is going to cost 50% less. And 35% of that, let's say, is actually due to improved efficiencies. And then the other part is going to be due to the fact that it's a smaller battery, it's a smaller car. And the lower range version of that is going to cost 50% less than what it costs probably to make the Model 3. And Tesla will be able to sustain high operating margins on it. Not super high, not like Cybertruck high, but they're going to be able to get, 10 to 15% operating margins contribution from this vehicle, which is going to have enormous volumes. The total addressable market's huge. So they can quibble over if it's 35% or 50, but the thing's going to be way cheaper to build than any other EV in the world, and there'll be no competition at that cost at that price level. And there's going to be significant.
I don't think the article said that. I think you're.
Well, I have some
personal
editorialization.
color.
Yeah.
It would be amazing if Dana Hall said there will be no competition. Omar, what were your key takeaways?
Well, it's really interesting that Ford has said, you know what? Fuck the big electric vehicles. We're never going to make money on them. We are actually focusing on a smaller platform to compete against Tesla and the Chinese. So they, of course, have spies. They try and talk to people. They try and find out what's going on. And I think serious people are looking at this. They talked about the guy who tried to build a digital replica to see how it would all work. And the people who are looking at this, the experts are saying, oh my God, they could actually really be onto something here, right? We've been making cars this way for 100 years. What if there's a way to do it with modern technology that actually uses less space and is more efficient? And absolutely, why not? Did we invent the perfect method of auto production 100 years ago and that's it? Probably not. So I think smart people are looking at this and thinking, okay, the casting approach was wildly successful and adopted by the industry. Could they have something here again? And there's reason to take it seriously. Now, of course, there's risks trying something new as opposed to adopting a novel production method. But if it actually pays off and you can actually build a factory using less space more efficiently and have it produce more output, then that's huge. That's a sustainable advantage that even the Chinese won't be able to match. I mean, they'll have to copy it and redo their factories with that approach, whereas Tesla is building up Mexico and Austin on a greenfield approach with this technology. Finally, there was an interesting job posting. I forgot what exactly it said, but it said our next fully autonomous platform. So we're seeing FSD 12 right now start to be able to do perfect drives for people across the countries. No intervention. Not all the time, but sometimes. So we're going to go through 2024. We got 9 months left this year. We're going to go through 2025. At the end of the year, the next gen platform is supposed to ship. So maybe it even goes into 2026. If there's issues with the new production process, I think that's likely. But you're essentially having them come up with this new production process, which is going to be able to produce a $25,000 compact crossover with steer by wire, which is going to be an amazing car. I mean, it's going to be the Tesla. It's going to sell more than every other car they make combined. And then I think they're actually going to build a dedicated robotaxi vehicle on the same platform with the goal of just getting the cost per mile down to the floor as much as possible, just the lowest cost per mile you can get for that base load traffic of just like one person or a package or something. And it's going to be smaller size than the 3 and Y, and they're going to start producing that. So, I mean, these products are probably the most important thing going on in the company as far as the future growth. If you can make a factory smaller and faster and build more of them quicker, then that goal of scaling up volume 10x, right? We're making 2 million now. We want to make 20 million in 6 years. Then this is going to decide whether that actually happens or not.
Wes, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Difficult to find the mute button.
Really? Or were you doing something else? Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I was reading something else, but I'm listening.
Oh, okay. What did you make of this article?
I have history with Dana. She reached out to me several times back in 2014, 2015, when she was with San Jose Mercury News. And I never gave her time because I felt like her questions were not really in line with the company's mission. So I've got history with her. But I think she got a lot right. I also think she got a bit wrong. And, you know, that's for everybody to decide on her own because it's largely subjective. But this idea that, you know, the manufacturing line is going to substantially change isn't really what's happening. They're just taking the cabin and they're breaking it into two pieces. And even though that's like super, super, super simple to think about, you know, in practice, it's super, super hard because there's so many things you have to design to make that possible. You know, you could basically like, you know, half of the car is fully workable, you know, before it's kind of sandwiched together. So anyway, there's that. But she did get a lot right with the painting process, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that it was factual in that sense, and I like that. There's always this kind of like undertone for me whenever I read her articles now that she's with Bloomberg. It's been kind of that way. Maybe she doesn't have editorial control over those, but anyway, that's kind of my general feedback.
Thank you, Wes. We have a question from Marta Liao. If she wants to come up and ask it herself, she can. Otherwise, I can just voice it to you. Let's see if she's here. 2014, 2015, is that what you said? That the undertone is coming from, Wes?
Yeah, you know, back when I was at Tesla, there were other people that she reached out to as well, and they didn't give her any type of information or anything like that either. And also, I don't believe she ever got Elon's time either. And sometimes I feel like some of this things that she writes and does maybe stems from that. So take that as what you will.
I think Elon blocked her for a little bit back in 2019 to 2020. But I thought she had a good rapport with the Tesla community back in 2017. And then things kind of went south with the multi product. So I'm surprised to hear 2014 to 2015 was also bad. So maybe it's a love and hate relationship every now and then.
Well, it was me kind of reading between the lines, and the stuff that she wrote back then, maybe she had more editorial control over, and it came across, you know, more positive. Largely back then, Tesla was a huge improvement to the Fremont part of the Bay Area. You know, a large employer, brought a lot of money in, things like that. So I can see why they may have had a more positive tone. I was selling papers at the time. I'm just trying to like read into what was happening. But some of the things that she posed to me, you know, it's like I'd ask her, like what are the questions you are looking to get answered, and just kind of give me a rundown on that. And it was, more along the lines of, what are the limitations of the system, or where do you think the system will fail most easily, and what are the specific areas that you've seen failures in? And I'm like, wow, that's all she's interested in talking about, more negativity. And I didn't appreciate that.
I got you. Well, thank you for that, backstage insights, Larry.
Yeah, Dana Hull, it really bothers me, and this goes back to the time when those two guys who were blind drunk drove the Tesla into the tree, and she broke the story by speaking to the chief constable who was on the site, and she broke the story, and that started and the way she broke the story started the whole story about they got into the back seat and the car drove itself into the tree. And I can't find it in me to forgive her for how she positioned it, and she never really apologized. She never really climbed back when the story came out. So she's clearly got a very strong agenda, and that agenda comes from long before Elon stepped out politically. A lot of journalists have taken a very antagonistic view towards Elon since he became so political, but hers comes from way before then. So I think that this article she wrote was actually a lot better than her normal approach. It was grudging. You could see it was somewhat grudging. But, I listened to that Autoline episode where the folks from CareSoft talked about their tear down and their digital twin of the next gen, and it was pretty powerful. I would say there's a lot more to it than the relatively straightforward. And while what Wes characterizes clearly what is going to happen, I think that there's a lot more to it. I think the full integration, the 100% integration of low voltage to all of the components, I think is going to be very important. And the ability to actually build the electrical system in separate components and actually plug it in together is very important. I'm wondering, though, if they're going to actually get rid of all hydraulics in this coming vehicle. I think that would be quite revolutionary. The steer-by-wire is pretty magical, but if they could have brake-by-wire as well, I think that would be the end of hydraulics, and I think that would be quite an important step forward. But
Wes, what do you think about that?
I agree. It's overall less power, it's less weight, it's less parts. It's a shit ton more software, though. And that's where Tesla shines.
Let me ask you a more general question. Do you think all Tesla vehicles will have steer-by-wire and brake-by-wire going forward?
Oh, that's what I'd push for. I hope that's what the future is, and I would defend that with charts and graphs and material breakdowns and supplier identification and things like that. So yeah, that's what I'd do if I was there.
That's really good to hear, Wes. It really is, because that's what I think, that's where their future lies. And that takes out not only does it reduce their labor costs, but it takes out a hell of a lot of actual weight and cost. And when you take all of that into account, the industry is going to have to move very rapidly. Tesla opened up the book on the drive-by-wire, on the 48-volt system. I'm not sure it includes drive-by-wire, but certainly on the 48-volt system. it could really change, vehicle costing quite dramatically, and we need something like that. So I don't know. I'd be very interested on West Take that. I think they should stick to the Cybertruck type construction for the small vehicle. I just think that it's such a great experience driving that car.
Also, when I was reading that article and listening to how terrible paint is and how complicated paint makes the process, it just made me think of Cybertruck again.
Exactly. And that's just only part of it. I mean, just the rigidity of this body is what gives it the quality of ride. That's what I believe. I really believe that. The body is so solid, is so rigid that, the cockpit is, you just feel like you're in a house. That's really what it feels like. And that's part of the smoothness of the ride. I'd be interested to hear other people's take on that.
And you know what? I actually love not having to worry about it. I love not worrying about shopping carts bumping into it or little scratches here and there. It just feels much less fragile than any other
Bingo.
Tesla I've ever owned.
Right, I agree.
So environmental benefits, less pollution, simpler manufacturing, no need to take the doors off and put them on again and do all this stuff. No, your car looking aged as the paint gets scratched and fades over time. There really are a lot of benefits for a car with the scale of the next gen platform. A paintless approach, or one that they're just painting the exterior panels as the thing suggested, could be huge. I mean, when you're talking, millions and millions of units, maybe 5 million units a year, that adds up quick.
Yep. But whether or not they go to stainless steel, I think that the next gen car is going to be very exciting. I just hope that they're able to move very quickly. I really do. I hope that they don't miss that 2025 deadline. I mean, end of the year deadline. I think that's very important. I mean, in the long, over time, it won't matter that much, but it would be very valuable for them to be able to actually hit 2026 in production of the next gen vehicle. Very, very good.
Yep. Machine, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to contribute to the space, or are you kind of just hanging out on speaker board, trying to look good next to all these amazing speakers?
I'm just on standby mode.
It sounds like the boss is nearby. All right. We have another question. Let me see. This question comes up every now and then, but it is a bit of an attack vector, so let's kind of address it again. Maybe Wes. Question is, doesn't casting produce a more brittle material? How does Tesla get around this?
Did you say casting?
Right.
No, that's false. The material is heated, yes, but the alloy is such that it's designed to maintain its rigidity and its toughness through that process. So that's the specific aluminum alloy that they're using. And they developed this over a long period of time. So I don't even know where to begin. Maybe they have something specific, some material quality that they want to talk about, but it just doesn't. That's not how it works. That's not how injection molded or injection of this hot aluminum works. It's really fast, and it dries extremely fast. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this press in action, but they're amazing. And they work to the extent that you can press like 10,000 of these without an issue where you have to like materially rework it. And you don't have to engineer or change anything in the actual die cast that needs to be changed, because they're good for at least like 10,000 presses, sometimes even up to 100,000 or 250,000 before they have to be redone. So anyway, that's that side. The brittleness would potentially come from if that die cast warped or got worn out and then they didn't notice, and then there was like a thinness or a thickness, because if there was a thickness somewhere, there'd be a thinness somewhere else. And that's just not what happens either, because they have machines to validate the thicknesses in the thinnest parts, or where the structural loads are forming. I mean, I can go on about this for a while, but it's just, patently false.
Thank you, Omar.
Yeah, so with castings, they did have a problem really with large castings traditionally, where they would sort of get deformed. When you have a very large casting like that, it's difficult to get them to come out with good yield. But Tesla actually has a material sciences guy he works at both SpaceX and Tesla, and he develops alloys for both companies. So they have a lot of advanced material science work they do into making rockets. And they essentially developed a special alloy which gave them the properties they want, obviously strength, resistance to deformity, things like that. And there's a lot of advantages to the structural integrity when you go to casting. When you look at the old process where you really had hundreds of stamped pieces that were joined together, welded together, they have joiners, they're assembled together. You have a lot of area for error, right? When you're connecting 100 pieces together, let's say one of the connections wears out or isn't attached right or something. There's a lot more sort of brittleness there in terms of the structural integrity. Versus if you just cast everything once, it kind of comes out perfect every time. And in terms of the NVH, like the noise, vibration, and harshness, the casting's much better. It's quieter. There's nothing rattling around. There's no vibration causing discomfort in the vehicle. There's no harshness. So it's better from that perspective as well. And they kind of even put crash structures into the casting so that it'll kind of crash just the right way and give you a lot of sort of impulse. So yeah, there's no weakness, I think, moving to casting. It actually ends up being higher quality, more structural sound, and better in a crash, in addition to also being easier to manufacture.
Just
Thank you,
one
Omar.
point on that, almost. They have a very large materials engineering department that's shared between SpaceX and Tesla. It's not just one guy. It's a fairly significant number of people.
And then, one final point I would make is you take a look at Volvo, you take a look at Toyota, you take a look at these other companies that are adopting this casting process. When you got a company like Toyota that makes 10 million cars a year, choosing to use this for their next generation EVs, they don't just make a decision like that lightly. They really look at everything, and they determined that all of the positives far outweigh any of the challenges.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. Otherwise, we're going to change topics. While I have Larry here, I want to catch up a little bit about his views on macro. Larry, I think you were concerned last time we talked, maybe a long time ago, we talked about macro, about a potential recession risk. Are you still as concerned?
Yeah, I guess I owe you a coffee on this one. We're in a very interesting tipping point. I mean, it's quite possible that we will continue to see the economy expand, given all the other factors that we are experiencing. But I'm very worried about inventories right now. inventories in retail are rising at a very significant rate and not really being properly reflected. And that could be, the canary in the coal mine. So still a lot of concerns. But, employment is holding up and temporary employment is actually going down. So that's really quite a good indicator. So it's very puzzling. What's happening in the economy now is very puzzling, and nobody has really, the Federal Reserve, the chairman of the Federal Reserve talks with great confidence as if he knows what's going on. I think that he doesn't, and I don't think anybody really does. This is very, very new furrow we're plowing. But I'm afraid I do have to go now, Yaman. I really enjoyed being here, but I have to leave. But I'll definitely try and drop in more often. Thanks very much for having me. And
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Larry. Thanks for stopping by, and always welcome back. It's always good to have Larry on the space. What a wealth of information. All right. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. Omar, how do you think about inventory levels? Ken is asking the YouTube Live. All legacy OEMs inventory levels through the roof right now. They can't give the car away.
Are you talking about macro or just the auto industry?
Auto industry.
Well, inventories are at record levels. For the last few years, we're coming out of a period where there was incredibly low inventories. And now we're getting into a market where inventories are at multi-year highs since really before the pandemic. I think they may still be a little bit below pre-pandemic levels, but they haven't really been this high since then. So, it's quite predictable. And especially you look at the inventory levels of EVs, they're almost double the inventory levels of gas cars. People don't want these legacy auto EVs. They've realized that they suck. And okay, they've got now the supercharger network opening up that solves it, but nobody really wants to use an adapter. They need the new versions coming out at the end of this year, the 2025 model years, which just have the NACS port built in. So until then, I think it's going to be challenging to sell these legacy auto EVs. And you look at dealer sentiment about EVs, it's very poor, in part because they've got these EVs sitting on their lots. Did you know the F-150 Lightning shut down production in February, and they still just have Lightnings on their lot? They're still selling them because they just have so many. The production shutting down hasn't even affected them. So, it's obvious what happens when there's inventories. You have to discount the product, and that's going to harm Tesla and everyone else. Just because, for example, let's say you're Fisker and you're going bankrupt, you're delisting. Now you have all these cars that are going to be worthless, right? So you say, okay, we're cutting the price. We're going from 60,000 down to 30,000. Now there's going to be some people who are not so smart who say, oh, wow, Model Y, 44,000. This thing's 30,000. I'll go take this thing. I'm getting a deal, even though they're just getting this crappy car that isn't going to be supported. So this puts pressure. It harms Tesla's ability to charge a higher price. But it's sort of a natural part of the ebb and flow of the market. These market conditions will cause others to retreat from the market. We'll see less production of EVs in particular. You're seeing it from Ford. You're seeing Rivian keep production levels flat. You're seeing companies like Fisker go under. And this will cause supply and demand to come back into balance. Then I think you'll see demand really invigorated by new products, things like Cybertruck, the next gen platform, things like FSD 12. And I think Tesla will be very well positioned when that happens because they're one of the only companies that are still investing on the idea that EV demand is going to continue to grow at a time when almost everyone else is sort of just pausing.
All right, great. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. And in the meantime, I pinned at the top of the screens an updated chart to inventories by automaker, showing Tesla all the way to the left with the lowest amount of days of supply, despite the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out there about Tesla's inventory being high. Despite that misinformation, the fact is Tesla has the lowest days of supply in the industry across the world. Even Guru Focus, which is a third-party aggregator of data, they say Tesla has 60 days of supply, which is just completely false. I mean, but that's what people quote. Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. All right, well, in that case, thank you very much, everybody. The link to Patreon is at the top of your screens if you'd like to support this trade. If not, we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you very much.